My next topic is how to reverse a brand promise. I want to talk through two examples, Netflix and OpenAI. Netflix is succeeding, I'd say. If you remember back to Netflix, like their original promise was, you get the DVDs sent to sent to your house. And then when they switched over to digital, the streaming platform, the promise was simple. You pay monthly and you skip the ads. It's going to be so different from TV because you don't have commercials to deal with, right? And then in late 2022, they changed it by launching an ad supported tier under pressure from their slowing growth. There's huge backlash to that. But as of Q1 of 2026, it accounts for about 60% of new signups, and they're on track for 3 billion in ad revenue this year, doubled from 1.5 billion last year. So how did they not blow up their brand? They never touched their premium tier. They are charging more and more for it, of course, but you get the exact same thing, right? It's still ad free. You don't have to deal with anything new. They kept the ad load for the ad paying ones extremely low. So it's about 4 minutes per hour. So that's about a quarter of what it is for traditional TV. Netflix VP of Advertising, Nicole Pangus, said, "We're not going to deliver an ad just because we get paid in that moment." So it shows that they are still thinking about the amount of ads that they're putting in front of people. And honestly, I think if they can keep it below what Hulu does and what all the other ones do, you'll at least have that comparison of like, well, we're not as bad as that, right? Another thing is that they didn't auto-enroll anyone. Unlike Amazon, which silently moved Prime Video users into ad-supported plan in 2024, Netflix made the switch voluntary. So it made people feel as if they're making the choice. Do I want to continue paying for the premium tier with no ads, or do I want to keep the more affordable option for more people? So they positioned it as people who could afford Netflix, and then for the folks that didn't want to take that additional burden on. And then lastly, it's working because the product still feels premium, right? They're still doing a lot to, come out with new shows, both premium TV and reality TV. I feel like reality TV has, kind of taken on more of the content, and probably the lower end content that people are willing to watch with ads. So the advertisers are getting a return of $60 CPN versus 10 to 15 on social. So they've protected the environment both for their users, but also for advertisers by making it more attractive for them to target Netflix users. Now, OpenAI, part of the problem there is how adamant Sam Altman was about not having ads in OpenAI. And so now that they've, switched and sell people's data, there's the backlash, right? And we saw it more specifically when the Anthropic came out with the Super Bowl ads saying that they would never do ads. So it really just paired them up against their rival. Claude has bringing over those people that are willing to pay for like enterprise pricing for their model and versus OpenAI. So Keaton, are any thoughts you have here on Netflix or OpenAI, and kind of where you see ad revenue heading?
It's funny. The companies that are the largest when it comes to ads are basically Meta and Google, and I think Meta might have
Mhm.
surpassed Google's revenue in ads recently, if I'm not mistaken. I saw something wild
Mhm.
like that, or at some metric, but don't quote me. So I think the big thing in my head is these companies, if they're going to do advertising well, they're going to have to personalize the advertising.
Mhm.
That's it. And I think Netflix has some of the best personalization data,
Mhm.
like as one shot, which is like what you consume. That
Right.
implies a lot of things about you, demographics wise, and that's tried and true how like brands buy.
Mhm.
So I think they have a edge, right? TV ads, Netflix ads. You can squint and say, okay, time of day, type of thing, got it. You could probably triangulate a lot of things about the person. And
Mhm.
Netflix, I'm sure, buys data and all that stuff, I would assume, for their
Mhm.
targeting. Not that I know if they do or not, but most companies do.
I mean,
And
it would make sense just
right,
based on, especially if they want to make ads be more personalized to people, they have to have additional data
that's
on
right.
it.
So I think the key for OpenAI is going to be what kind of data that's not some made up metric or social like Facebook tried, which I know OpenAI does not have as an angle, but they tried social for so long it didn't seem to work. And
Mhm,
then they went back to basics of targeting and saying just target on things you want to target on
mhm,
advertisers and we'll give you the audience, right? And that's kind of been the play for Google, them, and it's just based on data. So what is the data flywheel for OpenAI when it comes to that sort of uh, targeting information and context that advertisers are looking for? So that's one kind of way to think about it. I think that's the tried and true. And then the other way, which all these companies tend to try, but usually it doesn't work, is try to do something cute and different. But the ad companies are like, "No, I'm just trying to target these people. I already know it's a mix of channels. It's not like I'm gonna put an ad on your service and they're just gonna convert all of a sudden because like 100% convert. It doesn't work
mhm,
like that. So then it's an advertising mix, and that mix needs to be powered by something. So, if I were them and I'd be thinking hard about this, I would actually try some more basic things around retargeting
mhm.
and things like that so that you're just bringing in pixels from other places potentially, or doing that sort of model and then just retargeting people and using that as the hack. That would be the kind of thing that if and when they introduce things like that, I'd be super interested in kind of how they're thinking about it, because I think you kind of need a wedge to some extent of something that just works really well, and retargeting is kind of, they have a lot of impressions they can run if they just decided to figure out how to do retargeting well.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things that's super interesting about Netflix is I think they have so many more avenues doing that like cute weird ad that you're talking about, right? They just announced, I think a week or two ago, we talked about it here about how for one of their shows, the Kate Hudson, sports show, they're including 5 brands in their as like product placement inside the show. I thought that that was like a neat way for them to kind of think about like, okay, we know that people don't necessarily want to watch ads and we can't do that for our premium users. What other way can we get brands inside content that might not be as obvious? And this is one of the solutions, right? Especially for a show that revolves around sports, right? We mentioned this as well for the F1 movie, right? They went out and got sponsors for the car, right? So like companies were able to put their ads on the car that was racing inside the movie. Expensify was like the main company that sponsored the car, and so they made money off of that, right? So we've seen that before with product placement in like Marvel movies, James Bond movies, right? So the fact that now it's like shifting on down to TV shows makes sense. And then we also have to recognize that Netflix is growing their podcast network, right? Ringer, Barstool, all those, and bringing those in house. So that's like another avenue there of like how they'll be able to promote more brands inside shows that aren't as obvious. Whereas like OpenAI, I don't feel like has those avenues quite yet, especially if they're not keeping the memory like, I mean, I'm sure they have it, but so far they're making it seem as if each of the chats are different. So you might not get that crossover that you speak about, how you want to travel to like this thing here, and then for them to bring it over into like another chat. So are they going to make each individual chat have brands that sponsor those chats depending on what you're talking about, or are they going to start like mixing and matching depending on like what you're doing on their platform? That would be something to keep an eye out for. One thing I did want to bring up here is someone posted on Twitter about a Princeton research paper that showed that when you're inside ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, and Gemini, the top answers that you get for your question are going to be sponsored ads that are coming from the companies that are sponsoring ChatGPT versus like if you're in Claude, you'll get the sponsored results for those companies. So how much of this is going to be we're giving you the best answer, which is kind of what you would expect from AI right now, versus like we're going to get to a point that like we're just going to have a bunch of sponsored ads competing against each other that might not actually be the best product. And that I feel is like going to be the biggest thing that people are going to be complaining about, because people want the best, they don't want what people the ad is like paying you for, right? And right now, when you do Google search, like, most people just kind of avoid the first, 5 to 7 listings because they know that those are like paid ads, and go down to where, um, you're getting like results from actual people. But I mean, of course, the chats are gonna be bringing up the sponsored content because like that's where they're gonna be making their revenue from.
That's right.
So we'll see where that goes, but, OpenAI did, open up, like, the ad network last week, so I'm sure a bunch of companies are gonna start trying to, like, jump on and try to see, if they could be one of the first companies to start getting, sponsored placements, because, much like Facebook and, Google when they were first doing, search, the companies that were first still get a lot of lift to this day unless you're paying like a lot for like, the keywords to compete against them. The biggest things there are that Netflix adding ads doesn't make you trust Stranger Things more or less. It's just kept separate from their actual product, which is why I think it's far more effective because people have that separation. Like I was still going to watch Stranger Things, like fine, you're giving me ads like here, just like regular TV. That makes sense for me. Um, we'll see what happens with, the sponsored brands inside the shows. But I think if Netflix, keeps it to like being very relevant to the show, it'll make a lot of sense. The big difference here with OpenAI is that they're reversing their utility promise. Like their main point was, we're going to help you find the best result for what you're asking for. And when ads start coming in the way of that, then it's no longer, being useful for people anymore. If you guys are brands that are looking for, ways to buy ads, like I would suggest try Netflix. Like it could be cool to be in a show or something.
That's totally true.